Hi, welcome to Waylo's Workshop. I'm Waylo, and this is the Batman. That's right, the Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader. He's looking really good. This figure is made by Knight Models. It's intended for their Batman miniature game. I initially collected him with the intention of painting him as part of my collection. But I've become real interested in playing the game now, so I wanted to come up with a tabletop version of him. As you can see, I went with classic Batman colorings. If you're a comic book fan, then you know who Neal Adams is, which is what I based his coloring on. At a distance, he looks pretty awesome, I think. Across the table, he'll look quite menacing. Again, the sculpt is phenomenal on this. These guys just do brilliant work. I still have to go back and paint the Batarang black. And of course, there you go, his menacing white eyes. So I'm very happy with the way he turned out. I'm really liking the way he looks. I put together, I still have to do a base for him, yeah. The base that came with him is kind of small. I'm not real happy with it, so I'm going to be looking for something different to do for the basing, or maybe creating one of my own. As far as it goes, I'm going to show you the video here, how I painted them, how I came up with the highlights and the lowlights here without using any washes. Anyway, with that, let's go and jump to the video now of how we painted them. Okay, here we go for a little high-speed painting action. I'm using a wet palette here, and what I'm doing is I'm blending the colors together to create the color of his cloak. This is the base color. It's a little bit darker. I try to go from dark to light with this one. What I'm doing is I'm keeping the paint super thin. This way it applies pretty easily. It also allows me to get into the deeper recesses between his body and the cloak, into the folds of the cloak. It just kind of, the capillary action lets it just go where you need it to go. So I'm covering his cowl, his cape, his gloves, greaves, and boots with this, as well as that, I don't know what you call them, his briefs there in blue. You also notice as I go, I'm occasionally tapping the bat symbol in the middle of his chest. And when I'm doing this, what I'm using is a super thinned out version of the paint. It's almost like a wash, because what it's doing is the capillary action is letting it run around the symbol and defining that edge, so that I can then go back in and paint it in one layer at a time, building it up slowly with a fine point brush. Here again, I'm just going in and adding a bit of the darker tone to the areas where I think I need it, the base of his boots, sides of his cowl, beneath his arms, some of the folds of his cape. And again, just keeping it super thin, letting those paints blend the way they should, so it looks quite natural. In regular lighting, it shouldn't look like you're jumping colors. Here I'm blending together two different colors to make the base tone of his body armor. What I'm using here is the darker tone, basically, a shade darker than what it'll end up as. And I'm using that to go in and cover the areas where I made mistakes with touching parts of his body with the blue paint. Also the darker recesses, beneath his pectoral muscles, underneath his arms, sides of his thighs, between his thighs, just underneath the ridge of his rib cage, which is real pronounced. So I'm going in and just trying to keep that nice and smooth. Here I'm going in and applying some base flesh tone, trying to give that part of his face a good coloring. I like this color. This is a Panzer Aces color, which I'll show you at the end of this. I really like this color, and what I'm doing with is I'm touching just a little bit of blue into it, which allows me to create almost a 5 o'clock shadow effect when I'm doing it. And again, now I'm going in and I'm using super diluted paint and just touching the eye sockets with a little bit of an off-white color, which I'll show you again at the end of the video. The white coloring that I'm using here is got just a tinge of blue to it, just to give it that almost Batman-y effect. I don't want stark popping eyeballs staring at you from across the tabletop. It should look natural. He's looking down. It should be a little bit off color. It shouldn't be full stark white. It shouldn't be like a foundation white color. And again, we're working that bat symbol, you know, trying to build up the layers. And I'm going back and touching up areas where the gray hit the blue and trying to create seamless divisions there. I'm also going in now, and I'm going to work a little bit on those darker areas, lighter areas. I'm playing back and forth with the gray tones, trying to keep that looking good and natural without colors being so stark that the lines appear to pop across his body and his chest. Here in the end of the video, you're going to see me working on his utility belt. What I did with his utility belt was I took a real bright yellow color, and then I basically grayed it out. I took a bit of blue, and then I took a little bit more gray, added that in, and I brought that tone down. And then I went back on the tops of the little pouches. I added in some pure yellow just to the tops of it, just to give it that light versus dark areas, which you'll see. And that's me doing it there. And that's pretty much it. That kind of wraps up what we're going to do here, and that gives you the basics of the Batman. We'll go back now and I'll show you the paints and brushes that I use to do this figure. Stay tuned. Okay, so here's the brushes I used. I'm a big fan of Army Painter paint brushes. They are not a sponsor. I'm not getting paid to say that. For the larger areas, I use the Wargamer Regiment brush. Let me show you the tip of this brush. This is a nice full natural brush. Holds paint real well, holds a point real well, and you know, these brushes, they last. They have a good wherewithal for them for the price you're paying for them. Here is a Insane Detailer. This is a real fine point brush. This is you know, going in and highlighting edges, doing his briefs, working on the bat symbol on his chest. And again, this is in Army Painter Wargamer Insane Detailer. I always keep the plastic tips on these brushes. Then here I've got the Psycho. I actually had this on pre-order from Army Painter's site. This thing is a nose hair on a toothpick, is basically the easiest way to describe it. I don't even know if the camera's going to pick the tip of this thing up. If you need to put a dot down someplace and make sure it goes where you want it to go, this is the brush to be using. So there you go. Hopefully you can see that. I always put these plastic tips on, again, to protect the brush tips from getting mangled. Last but not least, I've got this starter brush from one of the Citadel game systems. I purchased a paint set for it. I've been using this for mixing paint. This is one of my older, more beat up brushes. I try never to use my regular brushes to mix paint with. And then starting with the paints, I use Vallejo Model Color pretty much for everything except the yellow. The Vallejo Model Color here, the dark tone I'm using is dark blue gray. There's your number right there for ordering. I didn't use a complete black. What I did was I just, again, I darkened out the colors, or grayed out the colors to create contrast. Here I'm using a dark blue, and that's kind of more of a low tone, and my highlight color was this Prussian blue. And again, there's your tones. Sorry about the background noise there, kids. Now, as far as his body armor goes, I used two different kinds of gray. I used a dark blue gray, which is this bottle. Now, this is your darkest tone. Now, you use this as your dark tone, blend the two of these together to give you a mid-tone. Here you got blue, gray, pale, and that becomes your light tone. So between the two, you get three colors by mixing the two together and using the lowest tone and the highest tone as your highlights, and that gives you a nice smooth transition in colors without stark lines of demarcation. Panzer Aces makes a great series of flesh colors. I like using these. This is flesh base. These are really awesome for the military guys. Add a little bit of blue into this color, and you get the effect of 5 o'clock shadow. Worked out real nice. And then for the eyes, to keep them from popping across the room, I used white gray. I put just a little touch of blue in them to take the white down. And here, I don't know if you're going to be able to read that, but let's see if you can read that. That's actually, let's see if that'll come into focus or not. This is the old golden yellow. That's from the old Citadel paint line. Anyway, I like the way this came out. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate all the support and the fact that you guys still have interest after 5 months. Anyway, thanks.